Thank you for checking out the time tracking database by WaterWebWorks. It's free to use as a template for your own application. This tool is provided as is, along with these videos with information on setup, maintenance, management, and the user experience. If you'd like assistance customizing it for your use, our rates are posted on our TeamDesk expert listing, and you can contact us there.
All right, I'm going to try to explain some things on the setup, and I'm just going to hit the seriously confusing things, and hopefully you'll look at some of our other tutorials and the instruction files and everything else that TeamDesk makes to offer and be able to understand the basic things. So some of the stuff that I've made to make this work is rather complicated and slightly more confusing. And so let's go over it. Now, the number one table that ties this all together is the time table. And I'm going to skip over to the main view once in a while. And you might think that the table, the dashboard where you get the person start and stop, and this is important. And it's really not the important part of it. The important part is what goes into this timetable. Everything works off of this. If we do a list all, it just shows you here all the times in here. And this is one thing that people coming from spreadsheets will not understand completely or not think of. Let's put it that way. There's nothing wrong with it, but they start thinking that you have to have, if it's a day, you need to have a day as a full record. So they start trying to put in the start of day, stop day, lunch start, go home for taking care, letting the dog out, come back from letting the dog out, and it becomes a never-ending cycle of trying to add all the parts to the record to cover everything, and it gets longer and longer and longer. And that's not just for this time card thing. We've seen this happen for people who want to save files, people want to do just about anything, and when you put it into a spreadsheet, you need to separate those things for a time period, especially if you're working with days. But in a database, the database doesn't care how you put it together. And it makes it much easier to work with later. In fact, if you put it together like you would normally do on a spreadsheet, it becomes a nightmare on the other end. So all we care about when we put things together in a database like this is the start, the stop, what it is for, and who it's for. Everything else is extra stuff that I've brought into here. So we go in here and look at the timetable and look at these columns that I have in here. Okay, the reference period one here is who it's for. Then we have the type, a start and stop, and then these is the employee verified, so it's an OK box, not vital for everything, it's just a verification. This pay period thing here is a specialized thing and doesn't have to be there, but it is because we'll use it later. Note, I'm not sure you need a note there or not, but I have a habit of putting a notes field in just about every database table I make, because if you don't put a note field in, what happens is the people using the database will have something to say somewhere and they'll put it someplace crazy. So, if there's a place where they can type in, they'll type it in. One thing you do want to do in this, you'll notice when we go through, is you really actually will not, I made this type here as a drop down, and you really won't use it as a drop down, but when you're making your reports and some other things, if you have your choices in the drop down, it just makes it easier because you can select them instead of having to type them in. That's all. So but most of this type is going to be handled by buttons. Down here, we just calculate a few things for use in other places. The hours is the number of hours for this specific record. So Each record has an hours here. Uh, you notice I didn't show the one for end date. It's not really needed. Stop date, it's just used elsewhere, and what we're taking is the stop time stamp, which is date and time together, and just pulling the date portion out of it to use elsewhere when we link things up. But that's all there is to it. This reference here goes to the user. This reference here is referencing the pay period. So the pay period is what we want to pick from, and it says please verify because this is a when you verify your times as an employee. So if I was to go over here and go to a pay sheet like we showed in the other videos and view this one. Okay, let's not view that one because there's no times in there. Back. There we go. Go that one. No times in that one. Yeah. We are picking times that we don't have any actual times for. I'm going to go up to there's some times we can verify. Okay. So when we verify the times, one or multiple of them, it's going to ask you the pay period. It needs to do that so you're sure you're picking it, and that's what this column does. It's linking to the pay period. Now we get to some really confusing things on the times. These views are actually, these selections are for the pay sheet, and they're actually in the pay sheet side also. When you make a selection or a reference, it shows up on both sides. But this one here is an important one, and it's for this side, and it's for the get current time period. That one needs explaining. So if I edit it real quick and look at what I'm doing a many-to-many relation between time and pay period. Then what I'm doing down here is getting the current pay period. Now that one is very complicated, and what it is an estimate. It's a guess. It's the best guess that we can make. And you're not expected to understand this one. I would recommend doing it like I did it and go with it and look at other videos. But in effect, this function here of taking the index is getting a number of which record you want to take is by index. And what we do is we sort by the end date of the pay period, descending. And then we need the value that's the ID because we want to put this in the reference. All right? Then what we do is we filter, and we filter out everything that's before the current day, and the pay period is not checked. Okay? So if that's the pay period date end is before the current day, so that would be if the pay period ended yesterday, then it's before today. So we shouldn't be selecting it because it was in the past, and we're done with those pay periods. We want future pay periods. So, and honestly, this is very confusing, and it was the last thing I added to the database, so it's the least checked out. So does it work 100% of the time? I'm not sure yet. We haven't made enough testing, but I think it works. We've tested it a few times and it works pretty well. It's what it's doing is not doing anything what I would call hard and solid in the database. If it doesn't actually work, it would be an annoyance, but it's not going to hurt anything, and you can actually come in and take it out. And where I used it, that's the more important thing. So we go back to my list here. And where you use it is right here, this pay period verify. I did an edit here, and okay, this is not where I use it actually. Where I use it is in pay periods when we use the button. And sorry, I do these on the fly, so being able to explain where I do things sometimes I forget since I work on a lot of databases. So this is where we use it. Okay, this is the button to verify our times. So when we're verifying times, I shouldn't have done that. So back here, and when this button here, when we click this button here, we verify times. That's this button here. And what I do is the first thing we do is set this to employee verified. Then we set the current pay period, is what we picked up, into the pay period right here. So this value here becomes this. And then this looks a little bit backwards, but then we ask the user for right here for the pay period and say, hey, verify it. So what it's doing is the first thing it does is make this assignment. This is what happens first. Even though it's lower on the form, it happens first. So we put that right here, and then we ask, hey, is that right? So when we have a pay period, it ignores this. It ignores everything except what it thinks by that formula is the current one, which should be the oldest, the one that's just closest in this time period, and it puts it in here first. And all the rest are there. It just tried to pick it for you. So that's what it does. And on the times table, I'll show you a couple of other things, and then I'm going to break this and go to making the next one. And I'm sorry this is very long, but it is very confusing. We do have a couple of views in here that we use in other places. The important ones is employee verified, not employee verified, verified by. Those are used over in the pay sheets, and they're pretty simple. I have everything set to defaults, and what it amounts to is if the employee is verified, show it. The other one has, and it's not in there. That's all there is to those, but you need them for the other views.